Welcome back to the Montgomery Companies podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Montgomery, and today I have a special guest that is dominating in so many areas of life. This guy is a family man. He's a man of faith. He's a speaker. He writes. He leads a huge organization. He has boundless energy. This guy's energy is infectious. He is a positive force for good that's affecting so many people in a really significant way. We recently got connected through my friend, Tyler Dickerhoof. So I want to give Tyler a shout out. Tyler, thanks for allowing this conversation to be possible. And with that, I want to welcome my new friend, Simon Arias, to today's show. Simon, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. I appreciate it. Looking forward to spending some time.
Well, we're going to dive right into what everybody sees on the outside. And then we're going to talk about the inside, because I know that you're a man of purpose that lives on great mission. And we're going to talk about faith and family. But before we go there, if you were to look Simon Arias up on Instagram or any social media channel, what you're going to see is this guy that's like hopping around with people, getting people hyped, throwing fist pounds. You have big energy. You have a team that gets together, literally, I don't know, it's dozens and dozens of people, and you just light them up like consistently. And so number one, I want to know a little bit about your team. I want to know why you do that, how you do that, because you've built a first-class culture, and that's very obvious to anyone who looks at your content for more than 10 seconds.
So, the culture really was based, the vision was building a winning team atmosphere. So my only real experience coming into this business was sports. I played high school football and college football and had the opportunity to be a captain. And so I didn't have a ton of business experience, but I had experience on leading people, building teams, and I learned how to win. And how to win was building off of each other's strengths and bringing people together. The teams that win championships are the teams that love each other and operate as one and operate as a family. And so all I tried to do was build a locker room and build a team and build a family. And that was the mission and the vision of everything. So we've attracted a lot of athletes, and I've made mistakes personally and tried to grow from them. So I've been in the business now for coming up on 16 years. And so the picture we see today, is not the picture, that it was in my first year, second year. The vision, was there, but we're always growing in a work in progress. It's almost, I look back on things and people will pop up videos of me talking or speaking or something from 15 years ago to my team. And while I cherish those moments and they give me feelings of joy to be in that moment and looking at how bad I looked, the clothes that I was wearing, I'm like, why would somebody not pull me to the side and just say, Simon, we love you, but we really got to get you to switch up your outfits. Your pants don't fit you and your suits don't fit you. And so somebody told me my son got baptized recently and he had on all white and he's a young child and with a hat. And they said, man, that looks like your first outfit you wore to the company convention. And, I looked like I was getting baptized, that day. So, it's been a work in progress. We've made mistakes and grown from it over the years, but, we've basically built a team in a locker room has been the motto.
Well, I love it. Again, one of the words that I would use to describe you is energy. That's the word that hits me, when I look at your content and when I just connect with who you are. I want you to take us back to the beginning. So obviously you're an athlete. You had a ton of ambition. Very obvious when you talk to you that you're intense and there's been a thread of discipline throughout your life. We have some emerging leaders who are listening to today's show. Today, you've been very financially successful. You're incredibly well connected. You're connected to some of the biggest names, biggest brands. But take us back to when you were getting started. Like, who is Simon Arias, in his early 20s, mid 20s? Like, take us back to that guy.
Yeah, Simon Arias in his early 20s is a walk-on, staying in the spirit of sports. Anybody that understands and knows, sports, college sports, being a walk-on means you didn't get a scholarship. You're probably not the first person that the coach is going to look at to expect to, be a starter or take the team to the title. And, that's kind of was my upbringing. I was always a walk-on. I was coming in, I played at a powerhouse high school football program, still in the playoffs right now, Youngstown Ursuline. We won a state championship my senior year. And man, when I went to school there, I had my own family members telling me, you shouldn't go there. You're never going to play there. And, I found that through hard work and not quitting and being coachable, what you can do over the course of time. And, I had the opportunity to have some success there, which earned me the right or the luck to play in college. So I played at Division II school, Mercyhurst University in Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania, and got redshirted my first year and started the next 4 years at strong safety. And I was, last on the depth chart. I did get a scholarship, but it was, I was definitely not supposed to be starting as quick as I did. And that was through hard work, dedication, commitment, and playing with a chip on my shoulder because I was smaller than everybody else. I'm 5'7", 185 pounds. And so when I came out into business, I just kept the same momentum and the same approach of, I was a walk-on. I started out in business. Nobody knew me. I didn't have a friend to put their arm around me in the business. I was an hour and a half away from my home, didn't have any friends, but I knew how to work. So I'm going to just show up and do the work. I'm going to outwork everybody. That's a controllable. I'm going to show up with a positive attitude. That's a controllable. I'm going to be more coachable than everybody else and be the best student in the room. Always, that's a controllable. And by controlling the controllables, I was able to surprise myself on what was able to happen from there. Both from a promotion standpoint, getting promoted, moving up the chain, and also financially. I made more money in the first year in business than I ever expected to make in my entire life. And that's a combination of something big happening, but also I thought really small. I was around people that thought small. I come from a blue collar background, blue collar area where, if somebody made $100,000, that was like the rich person that I knew. I didn't really know anybody that made big money, that was young. So my thinking was really small. And so that was really the startup to it all. And as I had more success in the first few years, the more success that I would have, the more, in a good way, the more scared that I became. I felt that I didn't want to lose it. I didn't want to go back. And so that's the whole, I don't want to shove faith down anybody's throat. And I also don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm not perfect. Every once in a while I'll get fired up and, swear, or, I'll have a beer or a glass of wine or something. And, I don't really listen to too much, music I used to listen to back in the day, but once in a while, I'll hit the weights and put on some rap music. So I just want to be transparent, with everybody. But, in my walk early in business, I started to grow in my faith, and growing in my faith, taught me, a lot about, just staying humble, and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so I just had a lot of fear, a healthy fear in me in the beginning of not wanting to disappoint, the Lord. I felt, the Spirit of God, the hand of God was on me. I knew I didn't deserve the things that I was getting, at the moment. I knew it wasn't just me. And if I was wrong, I didn't want to be right. I didn't want to test it out, and so I just try to stay grounded and humble on the way up.
Well, one of the things that's worked for you, and this is very obvious to me, and just getting to know you, spending a little bit of time with you, but also watching you from afar, is you keep it real with your people. And I love how you talk about, personal power versus positional power. I believe that people would rather follow a leader with a heart than a leader with a title. And I think people see your heart, and I think you're vulnerable and you're authentic. One of the questions I love to ask leaders, especially those who've experienced really high levels of success like you, is how has failure shaped your life? And if you could take us back to maybe some of the early stage mistakes that you made, what were some of those mistakes? And then what did you do to learn from those things to propel you forward?
Yeah, I think I've just learned to develop a better relationship with failure. Failure is necessary in order to succeed. Those two things go hand in hand. You don't get to succeed at high levels if you don't fail. But there's failures that are, things that can take you out of the game. And then there's normal failures and mistakes that you can correct and is part of the process. And, so for me in the beginning, I remember some failures being, the way that the way that I talked, to people. I think I was, I had a lot of people, that I can get to go to the next level. I would coach people well. We would get people fired up. We would win. And it wasn't horrible, but I do things a lot different now. I lead more with my heart. I talk, I make sure I'm not offending people. It takes me a lot to really start to get harsh with people. Where in the beginning, I think some of the mistakes that I would make is I treated it, so much like a locker room. I adopted my football coach's, mindset, and the football coach, they're coaching people. If you jump off sides, drop down and give me 20. If you're late for practice, you better start running, and I'll let you know when to stop running. And just really direct and to the point, Nick Saban type of approach, just tough. And I realized that I wasn't coaching a football team necessarily, and I wasn't coaching Navy SEALs, necessarily. People didn't come here to play football, and people didn't come here to be a Navy SEAL. They came here to get loved on and for me to lead them to a better life. And the mistakes that I would make is, I think, being too hard on people too soon. It was for the right reasons, but John Maxwell always says leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they could stand. And I think in the beginning, sometimes I would disappoint people at a rate that they couldn't stand. And it would, I would turn some folks, away that now I look back on it and I think, man, I could have led those people, differently with my heart and with more patience, and probably would have gotten a lot more accomplished. So I remember that being, one of the bigger, mistakes, that I look back on and have some growing pains and had some growing pains through. I didn't have a normal mistakes. I didn't make a sale and I'd have to learn what I said in that process that could have costed me the sale, what I could have said proactively that would have earned, that the trust of that person to get that sale. But for the most part in the beginning, other than that, I didn't make, and I don't want this to sound horrible, but I didn't make a ton of mistakes. And it wasn't because I was so good. It was because I realized that I wasn't that good. And I listened to my coaches clearly with the most coachability, I think, than anyone that they've ever coached. Being 100% coachable to people that are really good coaches and really good at what you do prevents you from making a ton of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your acknowledgement of some of the mistakes that you did make, and you're able to reflect and say, hey, I could have done these things differently. There's a difference between tough love and love and tough. And I think love and tough is, starting with the relationship, right? Really believing in people. And I also think, what you said about having a relationship with failure is so key, and obviously has played a huge part in your success. With our team, we say fail fast, fail often, and fail well, which means we're going to fail forward. One of the things that you do really well, and maybe you've learned this through some of the early stage leadership lessons and maybe being too tough on people, but it's very clear to me that you cast vision for people in a radical way. Like, you deposit belief in a very intense way. And you quoted John Maxwell. I'll quote him again. He said, people will go farther than they think they can when someone else thinks they can. We have a lot of listeners who are leaders. They're in positions of leadership. What would you say to the leader who wants to deposit more belief, who wants to help people go farther? What kind of practical tools or advice would you give them about helping people do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think first, you have to believe in yourself in order to transfer belief into others. It's really sales. Yeah. Sales is a transfer of belief. So if we're trying to get other people to believe in themselves and think a little bit bigger, sales is a transfer of belief. So that means I have to sell that person on thinking bigger or having a bigger vision. And that means my belief has to be, I have to believe in myself and I have to believe in that person. And sometimes you'll see the person for more than what they even see themselves. And you have to be able to, again, John Maxwell says, put a 10 on their head. You put a 10 on on everybody. And so you don't see them for where they are. You see them for who they could be. You don't see them for where they are right now. You see them for where you can take them. And I think when the people see you speak that on their life, there's power in the spoken word. So it's one thing to believe it. It's another thing to speak it. And, I think don't hold those feelings in and don't be afraid. Sometimes people are afraid to cast big vision, on people. Cast that vision on people as long as it's sincere, and speak the spoken word, on them about, doing big things, getting them to believe in themselves and showing them the picture. It's helping to be an architect with them, putting it on their mind, putting it on paper of here's the vision that I see for you. Here's the vision that we have for your life, and always constantly pointing to that vision, because there's things in the process of building the life or building the business or building a home that are going to be setbacks, obstacles, things that frustrate people and make people want to quit and make people want to give up. And sometimes the only thing that'll make a person the only thing that makes any sense for them to continue to strive and go is if they have a vision for where they're going in a bigger picture. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Why am I sacrificing today? Why am I going through these things? Why am I falling down 7 times? I got to get up 8 times. Well, because your vision is this, and finding out what people want. And that's a real basic one in leadership that I think people miss oftentimes is, could you really tell us 100% what your people want, or at least your core group? Like, what do they want? Have you found out what they want? Do you know what it is that they want? And then after you find out what it is that they want, your job is really simple, because it's the more you help people get what they want, the more you get back what you want in return. So you could just have fun with it. You don't have to worry about getting what you want done. If you just add up what your people want done, usually what they want done is way bigger than what you even needed done or wanted done for yourself. And so if I can just focus on what do they want and how do I help them get what they want? And if I can help them get what they want, then everything that we want in leadership will come to pass. And, if there's no vision, people perish. Right. And so it always starts with a vision. I think that's probably, other than building a relationship with people, I think that's the leader's number one job, is to constantly cast vision and remind people of where you're taking them, where we're going, where you see them going, because the price is going to be heavy. If you want to play at a high level, you got to pay at a high level.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I love what you said about putting a 10 on somebody's head, right? We got to believe in people that way. You're seeing them for who they could become, not who they are today. And man, you're doing such a great job of leading your team. And I can see that just from a distance, right? Depositing belief into others. And I think part of your journey has also been about self-awareness. You've referenced being coachable several times now, coachability. And I see that too in your social media presence, right? You're always talking about young people being coachable, but really all of us being more coachable, right? The beginning of growth and development is self-awareness and situational awareness. So again, around practical tools or advice, whether it's an emerging leader or you might be speaking, Simon, to an experienced leader, because we're all being coached, right? The average athlete wants to be left alone. The good athlete, wants to be coached, and the great athlete wants to be told the truth. Come on. I know you want the truth, and you want to give other people the truth. So what would you say to the early stage leader and the experienced leader about what it means to be coachable?
Well, I think that at the root of being coachable is humility. And so if people that struggle with their ego, and I think it's normal to have an ego. It's just, you got to make sure that the ego is a healthy ego. I think some of your, you had Jordan, you had a Jordan picture behind you, Jordan, was the all-time great, to me. I love watching Jordan and his work ethic and his competitive nature. And, I think, Jordan had an ego, it's hard to be super competitive and to play at a high level if you don't have a little bit of an ego. I try to coach them up on 51-49, out of 100%. If your ego is 49% and your humility is 51%, you should be in decent shape. But at the minute that number gets flopped in your 49% humility and 51% ego, is when you're really going to be headed on a downward spiral because your ego's gotten out of control. And I think without humbling yourself, it's difficult to take coaching and receive coaching. And to me, the shortcut to getting to where you want to be is being the most coachable, person in the room. And, how we talked about, Maxwell says that leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they could stand. And so if I have two people in front of me that I'm trying to coach, and I know one person can't really stand to be coached quick enough, I can't really tell them the truth yet. I can't really tell them what they need to hear yet. I'm looking at them and I'm saying, okay, I need to build, it's going to take me 6 months before I can really tell this guy what he really needs to hear. Or I got to work on his humility a little bit so I can even get an opening to wait for the right time to coach him up on these things, because he's going to get so offended and so pissed off because, he doesn't take constructive criticism well. And if I got another person that anything goes, I can tell them anything from the way they dress to shave, to the way they talk, to just like, let me hurry up and, cut you, in a sense of everybody wants to be a diamond. You've heard that, right? Everybody wants to be a diamond. Nobody wants to get cut. And in order to be a diamond, you got to get cut. And, even to this day, one of my, I think probably, in my 20s, I had a very significant mentor that changed my life. In my 30s, I'm close to 40 now. In my 30s, my mentor has been Jim Tressel, who introduced me to John Maxwell, and Jim Tressel was the coach for the Ohio State Buckeyes, from in the 2000s. And recently, I had a mentorship meeting with coach, and first thing I said to him is, hey, I want to let you know that you can beat me. You can smack me. You can tell me. And I meant it verbally and physically, really, but I wanted him to know, like, you can tell me, don't hold no punches. I want you to know that you can beat me up a little bit. Like, I need you to tell me and check me if I need to be checked, and hold me accountable if I need to be held accountable, and tell me what it is that I need to know. And so young people and old people and everybody in between, the minute that you stop growing, you start dying. We're either growing or we're dying. And the best way to grow is to receive advice and wisdom from somebody that's further along than you. You should always be seeking out people bigger and better than you, and finding ways to pick their brain. And the more that you invite them to coach you, and that they know that you can handle it, the more they're going to give it to you. And that is the shortcut to the process. That's the expedition to the process. It expedites the process, I meant to say. And really, it saves you from making a ton of mistakes. I mean, you're going to have to make your own mistakes. You're going to have some setbacks and failures, but you can really shrink and limit the amount of setbacks and failures if you're willing to be coachable and listen to people. And you're going to set yourself ahead, because most people are not coachable. Most people think they're coachable. And then there's levels to coachability. There's you can be 100% coachable. You could be 90% coachable, 95% coachable. And guess who's the ones that make all the money and the ones that end up having the most success? It's usually the one that is 100% coachable. It's the one that is the most coachable, closest to the copy. Being coachable is not only implementing what you like. Being coachable is implementing things that you don't like. That's what's
so good.
Doing the stuff we don't want to do.
So good. Say that again. I want you to say that again.
Yeah. Being coachable is not about the things that we like. It's about doing the things that we don't like, that our coach is telling us to do. That's the separator. That's the stuff that separates people. Is my coach is telling me to do this. One person is going to take that and say, all right, I'm going to do all of this, but I ain't going to do that, even though he said to do that. And the other person is going to take it and I'm going to do it all. I'm not taking anything out of that recipe, even the stuff that I don't like, even the stuff that don't taste good, even the stuff that I don't feel like doing. It's often people fall and fail by falling victim to the way that they feel. And if you can only get up when you feel like it and you feel good, you're an amateur, and you're never going to raise above an amateur level. If you want to play at a professional level and you want to go to the next level, those people get up and go when they don't feel like it. Those people have learned to do things that they don't feel like doing. If you're always falling victim to how you feel and what tastes good to you, you're going to be short of the dream and the vision and the level that you want to play at. You got to be able to eat your vegetables. You got to be able to do the things that don't taste good, feel good for the long haul, because that's how you win.
Somebody needs to go back and listen to the last 5 minutes of what you just said. Heavy note taking right there. I appreciate your candor on what it means to be coachable. I also appreciate the humility that's inside of you. And if you look at Simon Arias from the outside, you could say, here's a guy who looks like he jumped out of a GQ magazine, right? He's got muscles. He's good looking. He's a smooth talker. Obviously, he's been very financially successful. But yet you're this big-hearted guy that is really calm and cool and collected, with people in conversation. And so, what I see in you is I see a person of faith. I see a person who knows where his giftedness comes from. And I see humility. And we talk about faith very openly on the Montgomery Company's podcast. And so one of my final questions for you, Simon, is what role has faith played in your leadership journey? And how do you lead in a corporate world through your faith?
Yeah, it's first of all, thank you for seeing that in me. I'm trying, I could do better. If you could see it on the, if anybody watches this on video, it's funny that to hear that you're talking about, I'm hoping to show and genuinely portray humility, but also be someone that my people that are around me and my staff and people that work with me would be able to say the exact same things and not something that I'm just acting like and something that I'm walking like. But I got a big old diamond chain on, it's like,
I love it.
Those two things don't go together. You got a big old wrapper chain around my neck with diamonds all over it. Oh, this guy's humble. It don't look too humble. I can't see Maxwell rocking this thing. Maxwell or Trussell, rocking this thing. And those are two humble guys that I'm trying to emulate myself after. But I'm from Youngstown, Ohio. And so you got to cut me some slack. If you don't know where that's at, it's you can Google it and look it up, but it's a place where they like to wear big gold chains and stuff. So I
love it.
That is out of my system, but I got me my consulting company is called Cash Money Consulting. So this is a marketing piece right here is my excuse. For rocking the chain. But, I think it's the only, you talked about my faith. I think it's I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my faith. I wouldn't have been able to make it this far. First of all, I know I wouldn't have been able to handle the success at a young age if it wasn't for me standing on the ground, solid ground of the Lord. I became the go-to person in my family and in my business at a really young age, quick, where I had nobody to cry to, nobody to go to, nobody to, lean on. And the only thing or person or, the being that I had was my Lord and Savior to lean on. And I learned through that journey of being vulnerable, where my true strength came from, because every single time I got carried through it, every single time I got carried out of it and above it, no matter what. And I knew and I felt it, that it wasn't me. It wasn't Simon Arias. And so I felt, to whom much is given, much is required. And so once you go through it, once you walk through the door of opportunity, you don't close it behind you. And so I felt obligated as to, why me? Why am I here? I had a rough upbringing. A lot of people around me, died and were murdered. So why me? Why am I here? Why is my business? Why? To me, it started to become clear of I'll get about your work if you get about my work. And so I started to try to pass on, what I've learned in my faith to other folks, young people. And I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of. While we're not perfect, you're leading 400 people, you're bound to have somebody in those 400 that's a little wild on a Tuesday, on a random day, 365 days, 400 people. Somebody's going to mess up and wild out. And so there's Simon's person right there. I thought he talked about the Spirit and they headbutted the windshield, or, it's like, and I got people that do wild things but I'm serving a lot of people and nobody's perfect, including me. But, one of the things that I'm proud of is I got young people And when I say young, like 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, making a ton of money, couple $100,000, $500,000, and they'll get on the screen and talk about how they're tithing 10%, and the impact that has on a generation of young people, where it's not coming from me, it's coming from another 21-year-old, 22-year-old. I'm proud of. We are the staple of what we do is mind, body, spirit, mentally, physically, spiritually, training. That's in our mission statement. That's in everything that we do. I think if I died, they'd probably put that on my tombstone right now. I preach it so much. And so I think it's a huge part of what we do. It's a huge part of the success that I've been able to have personally in business. And I know for a fact I wouldn't have the success as a father, as a husband, as a mentor. I have a couple youth programs. None of it, because nothing keeps me in check. Like just knowing that I'm held to a higher standard because of what I read and what I believe, and know that I have somebody looking down on me, that I'm held to a higher standard, because to whom much is given, much is required. And so there's no way for me personally, I wouldn't be where we're at. I know we wouldn't be where we're at if it wasn't for the foundation of bringing the Lord into our workplace. And I hire pastors. We got 4 pastors that I pay, that's on our payroll, that serves our people. They mentor people individually. They're there for people when they have, hard times. And that is something that I've tried to do, just as a small symbol to put your money where your mouth is, and show how much I'm invested in people developing themselves, spiritually, and what I wanted to do for the families of the people that I'm blessed to serve.
Well, I think you've done a great job of including faith in your mission and your outward with it, right? You wear faith on your sleeve. And so I just want to commend you on that. I think sometimes in today's America, in the corporate world, especially when you're a public figure, I think it can be challenging at times to do that. Yet the Lord has called us to do that. And I remember I was speaking at a conference several years ago, and I got off the stage, and one of the executives kind of pulls me aside and he says, "Hey man, you got a really bright future in speaking, but you need to know this. If you use words and verbiage like you use," and I think the word I was using was amen. And he said, "If you're going to use those words, you're never going to speak at Google." And I just remember thinking, well, then I'll never speak at Google, because I am who I am. And while I want to be tactful, and to your point, I don't want to shove it down somebody's throat. To whom much has been given, much is required, right? And Scripture's clear about that. So anyway, man, I love your spirit. I love how you roll. I love what you stand for. What's next for Simon Arias? It's very obvious to see what you're up to today, but people might not know the things that are in your heart, or the things that God is doing in you before he does something with you. So tell us what's next for Simon.
What's next for me is I gotta manage the 4 children that I've been blessed with, and in that whole journey. And so I'm having fun, there as a dad. Outside of the business and my family, I got a brand new youth program that I just started in Pittsburgh, which is where our main location is at. That has become a home to me. It's called Steel City Impact. And so I'm just looking forward to growing that thing and to helping. We're currently right now in a part of town that's much needed in a school. And I could just, my vision is to just change that whole area, change that whole school. Every month there's a shooting or something going on down there, and to just impact and impart our culture into that entire school and into that entire area is the vision that I got. And then, for the business, there's a number, just so, because I think if you keep score, it allows you to have something to fight for and train for as a unit, as a team, to cast vision to. It's really not about, the number. It's not about the money, but we're zoned in right now to do 100 million in business. We just did 30 million this year. So the vision is we're on 100 million in business, but only way that's going to happen is if I can just help a bunch of people, get what it is that they want. And so, in the process of doing that, we're going to try to win a bunch of souls at the same time. I want a bunch of people over to the Lord because I know it's impacted and changed my life. And at the same time, if you're going to impact the whole country, you're going to impact the nation, you're going to have people from all different faiths and walks of life. And I want those people to know that I love those people right where they're at, and not going to force it down their throat. I'm going to just do my best to walk it like I talk it, and hopefully inspire some folks in the process.
You're doing just that, man. You're leading by example. You're inspiring a bunch of people, and you've inspired me. So thankful that we've been able to share this conversation. I know our audience got a ton of value out of hanging out with you for the last 35 minutes. So where can people find you, Simon? I know where to find you. You're all over YouTube. You're on Instagram. You do a great job with your social media channels, but somebody wants to look up Simon Arias. How do they learn more?
Social media. I think, which is funny, I was the last one of my friends to get on social media. I was anti-social media. I thought it was a waste of time. And now I'm probably overwhelming on social media to people. So at Facebook, Instagram, they even got me on TikTok. It's Simon Arias. You could usually just look me up, Simon Arias on Instagram, Simon Arias on Facebook. And I think it's something similar to that on TikTok. So you could find me on social media. I got a podcast called The Grind Cast, The Grind Cast, and where we interview folks and try to continue to inspire and learn with others.
We'll be sure to link the podcast and all of your social media handles to the show notes. So if you're listening, you can find out more about Simon. Reach out to this guy if you need a speaker at your next conference. Be a great speaker, amazing man of influence, a great person of faith, and a family man at the end of the day that cares deeply for people. So it's been a blessing, man, to share this conversation with you. God bless you. You have a fan in the southeast corner of the state of Iowa in Jordan Montgomery. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jordan.
This has been another episode of the Montgomery Companies podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Montgomery, and we just want to say thanks again for tuning in, and give a special thanks to Simon Arias for your contribution, your time, and your energy that you invested into our community. As always, we want to say thanks to James Roth and John Choate of Storyline Multimedia for all of the work that they do behind the scenes to make this show go. Also, we would love it if you'd like, subscribe, or share this podcast in an effort to move our mission of impact forward with others. Be well, be great, and have an amazing day.